Keller.
Me as well.
Hi, everybody out there. I am Deborah Jackson, Executive Director for Heart to Soul Ministry and Heal 3D. And this has been a long time coming. I am so thrilled to be at LSU's Pennington Alzheimer's and Dementia Research Institute in Baton Rouge. And we are getting ready for our very first live stream. We're live streaming Facebook Live, which is at Deborah M. Jackson Ministries, and also Periscope Live. So we're looking forward to really beginning a conversation about the disease of Alzheimer's, various different aspects of Alzheimer's and how it affects families, and just from the disease perspective. And just a little bit about me. I spent 20 years in a very successful corporate career. I worked for companies like Merck and Johnson & Johnson. I've worked with neurologists, I've worked with surgeons, and never knew that one day all of that experience would bring me to the point of having, quite frankly, a vested interest in this disease of Alzheimer's. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I left my corporate career behind and started my own ministry and businesses. And about 3 years ago, I also, more importantly, became a caregiver. So I know firsthand what some of the challenges and the dynamics are. And as part of my own passion as a ministry leader, as a speaker, as an advocate, as even more importantly, a caregiver, I think it's so incredibly important that we become proactive in bringing information about not only just knowledge, but perspective about the disease of Alzheimer's. And who can do that better than an expert like Dr. Keller? And so we're going to spend just a little bit of time. I can tell you right now, we are not going to get through every single question, but we will have other live streams that are coming. Our goal is to really try and put out one live stream a month. We'll have various different kinds. And we're going to deal with about 3 areas. One is understanding the disease of Alzheimer's itself, recognizing symptoms of Alzheimer's, and then why early detection is so important. Now, let me tell you about this wonderful man, Dr. Keller, and the work that he does and why it's so important. I want to get this right, so I have it all written in front of me. But Dr. Keller is the director of the Institute of Dementia Research and Prevention at LSU's Biomedical Research Center. You've been here since 2008, yes. Is that right? And Dr. Keller's focus is finding new ways to treat and prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. Dr. Keller received his Bachelor of Science and his PhD from the University of Kentucky. And his PhD is in molecular and cell biology from Kentucky, and so his work has been ongoing. And try and say that fast, molecular and cell biology. Because of Dr. Keller's work at the Pennington Biomedical Institute here, the institute itself here at LSU is certified as an ADCS site, which I'll let Dr. Keller talk a little bit about that. But that really means, for your sake, that it is ranked among some of the top institutions for Alzheimer's and dementia in this country, like Harvard and Yale. And this is the only ADCS site in the tri-state area, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so we're talking about people that come from everywhere from parts of Houston to Birmingham to Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, and parts of Florida as well, right? And so just a little bit about Alzheimer's itself. Alzheimer's is affecting about more than 5 million people are being affected by Alzheimer's in this country. And it is now the 6th leading cause of death. And so this is not, you know, in a way we can say maybe it seems to be kind of sleeping on people, but it's very real. You know, this is a disease that is really growing in capacity. 1 in 3 seniors die with Alzheimer's, and there are more people that are being affected by Alzheimer's than both breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. In 2015, there were 15 million caregivers and 18.1, get this number, billion hours of caregiving time spent with caregivers taking care of loved ones, and in many cases without being paid, without pay, leaving their jobs, all kinds of things. In 2016, the number was greater than 236 billion. Now, is that billion in terms of hours? 236 billion hours in 2016, or 236 billion caregivers? Do you remember?
So I believe that counts as in terms of lost hours, lost wage, is how a lot of them refer to that.
Right, and in 2050 anticipated at $1 trillion. So this disease is not going anywhere, and the challenges that are connected with Alzheimer's and also being a caregiver of other kinds of issues is something that is only growing like in quadrupling digits. I mean, it's growing rapidly.
Predicted to triple in the next 35 years to 15 million people.
Right. So this is a very important conversation. The average caregiver spends probably about $5,000 to give care, and that doesn't really account for, that for some people that might be a vacation. For others, it's about, whether we can eat. And then there are all these people in the middle that, are trying to make swapping sacrifices over what they can do for their loved one and what they have to do to maintain life at home. So, so this is really important, and I'm really excited for you to maybe start out, Dr. Keller, by telling us a little bit about why Pennington. How did you land here? What's your passion? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. As was alluded to, I came here in 2008. I was the assistant director at the Alzheimer's Center at the University of Kentucky, and I got to see how an Alzheimer's Center, it was one of the first 10 in the United States.
Right.
So I got to see the impact that it had in the community. I knew that this area was this area meaning from East Texas to West Florida, didn't really have any major Alzheimer's clinical work going on, and it was also an area pretty desperate for clinical trials.
Yes.
So I was given the opportunity to come here at Pennington Biomedical to build an institute. Our goal was to become a center of excellence that provided for clinical trials in the area, to be one of the leaders in the country in that. And it was really the paucity or lack of resources in this area around that disease and an interest to bring, they reached out to me to come down here and try to build a center, and so I did, and was very quickly able to build a really great clinical team here, and a lot of community partners. We raised funds and leveraged those against NIH grants and contracts.
Correct.
And now we, at any one time, have 7 or 8 clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease or Alzheimer's disease prevention, and these come from the pharmaceutical industries as well as from the NIH. And so we really have a diverse portfolio of trying to combat this disease because, as you alluded to, one of the issues is that we not only want to find treatments because there's no treatment.
Right.
There's no way to treat or manage this disease currently. We have no way to modify the disease.
Right.
But we, equally important to finding those sorts of things are to find ways to prevent it from occurring.
Yeah.
Because if we get to this point of where over the next 35 years, 15 million people do have Alzheimer's disease, it's going to really be catastrophic for our society and our healthcare system. And it has the potential to bankrupt us in so many ways.
Absolutely. I feel very passionately about that. And a lot of times things don't become real until it comes into your back door. And then the effect that the rate that this disease and caregivers and all of that is rapidly increasing without a cure, without prevention, it could really bankrupt this country.
Right. We're back up against the wall. And like you said, nobody ever wakes up or thinks like today's the day I'm going to become an Alzheimer's caregiver.
That's right.
It's something or that I'm going to have Alzheimer's disease. It's one of those things that unfortunately does happen to a great number of people, and they lack the resources on understanding the very predictable things that are what is the disease, and what can I expect, and plan to accommodate for those things.
Yeah. Just before we get into talking about the fact that Alzheimer's actually is a disease, and this is not a normal part of aging,
Right.
Can you just touch a little bit on just build a bridge for people, because I don't know all of who's joining us, but I would imagine people of all types. Why would Pennington be important to the everyday person that's dealing with Alzheimer's?
So the mission at Pennington is to look for the triggers and treatments of chronic diseases throughout the lifespan. And while traditionally this has been a place that focused on youth and adults, particularly in terms of obesity and diabetes, the triggers and treatments extend beyond just youth and adults.
Yes,
so
it does.
Our area of dementia fills a really important need for geriatric issues. It's probably the geriatric issue facing us today in terms of a concern. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of how we fit into the larger scope of Pennington.
Yeah. So, that actually, leads us to being able to talk a little bit about the disease of Alzheimer's. As I said, I have, over the last few years, stepped into the role of full-time caregiver, even though perhaps in part because of some of the experiences I have, I was able to recognize some things very, very early and really jumped on it quickly. But me jumping on it wasn't as simple as me having my loved one jump on board. And so it took about 3 years before I could really help, my loved one. And then when I was able to really jump in and the door opened, we were able to begin what minimal treatment options that we had available to us, plus some other things that I do, but to be fully engaged. And that is when I relocated my life to take care of, of my family. So, explain the difference, because I was talking to someone the other day that we were just in a conversation and it came up, and you'd be shocked at how often this conversation comes up. And the person said, they don't have Alzheimer's, they just have dementia. But they were saying the same symptoms, which really implied that the person had Alzheimer's. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Right. So normal aging is associated with a variety of changes. A lot of them are unwelcome changes that happen. We're not able to recall as accurately as we once did, or as fast as we once did. We can't retain as much information as we once did. But we're still able to function throughout the day. We still do the social activities that we want to do. We still are able to work or pursue things that we want to do. They may take a little more time. They may not come out with the same outcome that we once did, we once had when we did those efforts. Yeah. But we're still able to not only do them, but to enjoy them. Yeah. That's aging.
Yes.
When that starts to change, the key thing that you see is that people will start to either drop activities or avoid activities, or continue on with the activities but have dramatically different outcomes. So they're not able to successfully complete tasks that were once routine to them. They require assistance where they once were completely independent. Yeah. But the harder, that's easier for people to identify. They may be in denial, as you mentioned. That's a common thing. But also the ones that are harder to find are those people that we call high compensators. So those are people that sort of they're changing their behavior to avoid being identified as someone that has a problem. They don't want to call attention to themselves, particularly this older generation of today. They were very independent. They change their behavior to not let people know how bad a problem may be. So the examples I always give people are, whenever we sit every day across from families and talk to them, the stories sort of go like this, to where you have Mrs. Jones was someone that, tell me about Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones likes to garden. Does she maintain a garden? Oh, yes, she's always maintained this very active garden, and she changes it out 3 times a year, shows her friends, blah, blah, blah. then that'll start to change to her gardens. She puts out 2 gardens a year now, and she still has people over. She still enjoys it. She goes out. That morphs to, we encourage mom to do her garden. We know it's something that's important to her, and her grandchildren come over and help on certain days. She really likes working with the grandchildren. She's less interested in the garden now.
Yep.
And that sort of, and then that goes to something like to where, the children go over now and they put in a garden for mom. She likes to come out and look at it. We like to remind her about certain things. She doesn't recall certain events or things about the past. To where ultimately mom not only doesn't put out a garden, or have any interest in the garden, it's something she completely avoids and has no association around this very important part that was a part of her life. And that's different than a normal life change. That's happening because of a cognitive problem.
Yes.
And
yes.
So I encourage people, the biggest time that we hear about someone's concerns are around the holidays. People that haven't seen family members in a long time, changes have happened that they really weren't aware of or aware of how severe it is. People can put up a very good front for a phone call or for a visit that's known to be happening. And what you got to do is, if you suspect that there's a problem, or even if you don't suspect, it's just a really good thing to drop in on family members. And 1, you need to be meeting your family, and 2, it's a way. That's how you find when there's potential problems. Be on the lookout around the house for things that are completely out of the ordinary. Keys in the refrigerator. Things that have been completely left unattended that need to be attended. Routines changing.
Yes.
Confusion around the days of the week or obligations that they've traditionally kept.
Yes.
The time of day. A lot of times for church-going people, it's not uncommon to hear about somebody getting ready to go to church at 8:00 at night. Just completely unaware that that's something that we do in the morning.
Right. Right.
Or perhaps in the evening, but it's early evening.
Yeah, I would say that, for me, I noticed something. It was ever so slight. It was the simplest thing of the person calling something other than what it was.
Right.
But it was almost in passing. And as quickly as I saw it, it was gone.
Yeah.
But I knew her. And I knew that was impossible for them not to know what that was. And so that was what put me into forward gear immediately. But it was really me trying to do it on my own, because what I learned is that there's a mastery that can happen with people in covering it up.
Yeah.
And this is what you were talking about. And really kind of adjusting their life around what they know is wrong, but don't know really how to fix it.
Right.
Or how to address it, or don't want to address it.
Right.
Right,
in denial.
Yeah.
And the